evening, the entire Mangaldas family would gather together, and there was a table on which a little girl would promptly jump up and somehow try to attract their attention and tell stories using movement. I don't remember a time when I was not dancing, says this renowned and leading dancer and choreographer of Kathak classical dance who we have amongst us today, Miss Aditi Mangaldas. Born in a family of business folk and intellectuals, Aditi ma'am started dancing at the age of 5 with her guru, Srimati Kumudini Rakhi. She describes her influences to be her guru's way of thinking and her own family, which was very liberal. She was a principal dancer in her second guru, Pandit Birju Maharaj Ji's troupe, for many years before branching out on her own. Aditi ma'am started the Drishtikon Dance Foundation with a vision to look at tradition with a modern one. There are two streams under which her work can be categorized: classical Kathak and contemporary dance based on it. There is one stream of thought that she calls Khulla Nach. Her works include Jeek, Swagat Vistar, The Sound of the Universe, Vrindakriti, and many more. Aditi ma'am has given Kathak performances in major dance festivals in India and has been featured in the festivals of India in UK and US. Celebrated around the world for the startling richness and intricacy of her dance and choreography, she was nominated in the category of Classical Outstanding Performance by the National Dance Critics Circle Awards 2017 in UK. She is a recipient of the Indira Gandhi Priyadarshini Award and Sanjukta Panigrahi Award. She has won much critical acclaim in major dance festivals across the world. As stated by The Guardian London in 2017, and I quote, Mangaldas owned the stage without trying to earn it. We now call upon Aditi ma'am to share her experiences and insight with us. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. That was a really generous introduction. Thank you so much, and welcome all of you. I don't know how many of you are watching, but it's a great honor and a real pleasure to be here. This is a great initiative started by the Nirmal Bhartiya School. Smile, because that, together we can, and that the power of the smile, we can make a difference if you want to. I would also like to thank Charu Wahi ma'am and for inviting me, and also Sayori ma'am for all the coordination, and Sangeeta Rana also. I'm going to show you two short extracts of documentary. And you'll wonder as to why I'm sharing that. I mean, it hasn't much to do with dance or Kathak, but it is to do with this magical world of ours. It is to do with humanity and what it is that we are all about. I start with a short extract from a documentary by the renowned American astronomer called Carl Sagan. And I'll weave it all in together, okay? So here goes.
The spacecraft was 3.7 billion miles away from Earth, so far away that it took each pixel 5.5 hours, traveling at the speed of light to reach us. From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But for us, it's different. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a load of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena.
That is our position of our Earth, of this beautiful place in this huge cosmic arena. And yet, everything we know, everything we love, all the discoveries, all the inventions, all the unfortunate wars, every form of life, of species, of flora and fauna, of the animal kingdom, every kind of culture and art, everything is on this little blue dot. And therefore, do we ask ourselves that do we owe it some kind of intense responsibility? Because everything we do, whether we are sports people or architects or a dancer like me or a musician or a teacher like Sayori ma'am, whoever we are, we make a difference. You may have heard about what is called as the butterfly effect. You know, a butterfly may flicker at a completely very, very distant place, at a different timeline. And yet it can have very, very impactful reactions completely somewhere else. And therefore it's for us as students, because we are all students of life, however old, however well you have done, we are all students of life. We owe it to life. We have a responsibility because everything we do matters. You know, today I'm communicating with you because of the World Wide Web. And I'm going to share how this came about. But we must remember, and in my case, I must think back to the millions of artists the world over, especially in India, who don't have this facility, who don't have this connect, who don't have the possibility of connecting with you all. And I think it is our responsibility, and it must be something that through our care and our love and the joy we feel for whatever passion we have to somehow include. We cannot, this world is for all of us. So another short little film that I share.
In 1962, American scientists and military experts feared what might happen in the event of a Soviet attack on the nation's telephone system. A computer scientist named J.C.R. Licklider proposed a solution to this problem, a galactic network of computers that could talk to one another. Little did they know, this idea would eventually be transformed and used for sharing information, entertainment, social networking, etc. by more than 2 billion people today. The World Wide Web. Now, how far back could you go in your life to show whose move at what time sparked a series of events that led up to you watching this video, making you what you are today? There are generations yet unborn whose very lives will be shaped and shifted by what you do today or tomorrow and the next day, because everything you do matters.
Everything you do matters. And everything, the way you do it, matters. As Sakshi already mentioned, I grew up in a family that was very liberal, that encouraged debate, that encouraged questioning, that encouraged us to agree or disagree. They say that when I was very young, my paternal grandmother was living with us. She was quite a matriarch. And so the entire family would gather. And my parents noticed that what gave me joy, or my main way of communication, was through movement, because I would jump onto this little stage and do silly movements and try to share the joy I had felt, or all the things, emotions that were surging through me through that day, through little few movements of my body. So they thought, well, maybe some gene has, jumped many generations, because there was no dancer in our family. It was a family of industrialists and academicians. So what they did is that they put me into a music class, into a dance class, a painting class, also, in fact, a community science center, where we were encouraged to study through experience, through experiencing rather than rote. So what happened was that failures were not failures. We didn't look at failures with a sense of depression and being horrified, but failures were something that taught us how to improve, what to learn, and how to go ahead. They put me in a wonderful school called Shreyas, because that too encouraged a child and a grown adult, as I was, to be free with their imagination. At the end of every year, we would select a particular poetry or text. One year it was Don Quixote from Spain. And at the end of the year, we would all talk about what Spanish food was about. With our own parents' clothes and our own clothes, we would try and fashion Spanish clothes. We would learn flamenco and enjoy and learn through the act of experiencing. And I think it's very important as parents, because some of you may be here, to let that imagination flow, because I know that it helped me a lot. There were many times that I would rebel with my teachers, rebel with my parents, against my parents, but always with a sense of love. And therefore, because that is what they had inculcated within the schooling system, within my family, that agree, disagree, debate, but take responsibility for what you feel you would like to do, and then eventually face the consequences. They always told me that love and joy obviously adds on, and everything that's negative is a subtraction. And so rather than be dogmatic about religion, dogmatic about nationhood, dogmatic about who you are, be a good human being. And I think that has really helped me in my growth as a dancer. But like all of us, nothing is smooth sailing. It's not as if that I had a passion for dance, so everything I did, every time I danced, there were no disappointments. Of course there were. That it was not always joyous, because at times I had many low moments. I had times when I had to face in very, very difficult situations. I remember once that I was feeling just extremely low. I don't know why, what it was, but some events triggered it. And my grandmother said, Aditi, I didn't feel like dancing at all. I didn't feel like studying, though I remember I loved mathematics. I didn't feel like doing anything. And my grandmother said, why don't you just wear your bells? In Indian classical dance, we wear the ghungroos. And she said, just walk around the house. You don't need to dance. You don't need to do anything. Just walk around. And you know what happened? The resonance of those bells, the gunj of those bells, slowly, slowly, I would walk and a rhythm would enter my head. Takita taka, takita taka, taka takita taka. And my hand would start moving and my head would move. And I would say, takita taka, taka takita taka. And then slowly, slowly, the joy of the passion I had re-entered my being. I can't say re-entered, it was already there, but it felt as if this huge rock, and a rock that to me felt unseeming, a rock that I felt was such a huge obstacle, slowly dissolved. It wasn't there anymore. At times you study very hard, you know, and well, maybe you don't do well. Isn't that part of life? I remember a time when I worked really hard for a production, and it was like morning and night in complete immersion with full of vigor. But when I put it forth, when I shared it, there were terrible reviews. It was heartbreaking for me at that point. And if somebody had said, you know, it was just like, oh my God, how could this be? I've worked so hard. I've put at that point, it seemed my life into it. And my mother said a beautiful thing. She said, Aditi, somebody or many people have criticized it. Listen to it, because there is something in that criticism that will help you improve. But don't make it like a burden on your shoulders, because if you have that burden of disappointment, how will you move? If there's a heavy weight on your shoulders, how are you going to move anywhere? And how do you get rid of it? She said, just shrug and it's gone. And that taught me how one needs to face failures, how one needs to learn from it, how one needs to see it in its perspective. You know, like the Carl Sagan movie, the blue dot in the universe, that's what it is. And yet to us, it is our own whole world. So that was my upbringing. And I was also very, very honored, very blessed to have the two gurus that I had, who are still my gurus, who are living legends, Srimati Kumudini Lakhya and Pandit Birju Maharaj. Because they taught me about how you get immersed in your passion and how this passion, which fills me with joy, how I'm able to share that joy with you, and how that joy maybe will spark a little bit of creative joy within each of you. Kathak is a very old dance form. Many of you may never have heard of it. Many of you may know about it. Centuries ago, groups of people would go from temple to temple along the Gangetic Valley, narrating stories from our mythology. Kathak means a person who narrates a story. So they would use simple gestures like a flower that opens or a bee, narrating and sharing stories from our great mythology. That was the place where one would meet and socialize and share one's knowledge of famous poems and beautifully written texts and stories. But then the Mughals settled in the north, and they were great patrons of the art. They had great aesthetics, as you can see from the immense art that has flown from their time, the immense architecture, music, painting, sculpture, of geometric sculpture. And what they did is that they transported this dance, existing dance from the temples into their courts. Now you see how amazingly contemporary and fluid the dancers of the time must have been. Because though the dance remained the same, the reason, the intention, the reason why the dance was there changed. Here you had nobility looking at you. You had to add dynamics, interest, intricate rhythm patterns, fantastic pirouettes to attract the attention of the nobility. And therefore, Kathak incorporated within its repertoire interesting influences from many different streams of life. I would like to, without losing the essence of Kathak, Kathak grew. So I would like to share 2 short videos of a solo Kathak and a group Kathak work. And another group work which is called Now, the British came to India and they looked down upon Indian dance. It didn't suit their scheme of things. But fortunately, Kathak survived in small principalities till we got independence. And post that, the government realized the uniqueness of this wonderful dance style. Not only that, but of all the other various folk arts and classical and traditional arts, and put it on the proscenium stage. I want you to notice or look at the word uniqueness. Not superior or inferior, but unique. And I think that is what, as good human beings, we have to concentrate upon. Because each of us, each human being in this world has a special, unique quality. That's not necessarily inferior or superior to anybody. Our culture is not superior or inferior. Kathak or our whatever you are good at is not, you don't compare it to anything but to your own uniqueness. And I think it is you yourself, your teachers, your friends, your parents, your family have to encourage this point of uniqueness for you to discover that uniqueness within you. Because, and not whether you are better or worse than anybody or anything. And uniqueness doesn't have competition. There is no jealousy. There is no hatred. It's discovery of yourself and what is your unique point. I also feel that that helps us really to find a joy that doesn't depend on other people's happiness and joy, or other people's understanding of our unique personality. Now, how do you encourage that? As I said, my parents encouraged it by debates, questions. Good schools encouraged it by not rote learning, but by letting the students experience as much as they can, question as much as you can. You don't take tradition as if it's a pond. What is tradition? It's like a flowing river. Now that river may be flowing through a city. And what does it imbibe from the city? The city lights, the architecture, the tall buildings, maybe even pollution, maybe the honks of the terrible noise, the pollution that is what it imbibes. When it goes through a forest, it's something else that it learns from. And so it is constantly rejuvenating itself. That river that doesn't wear blinkers, that student that doesn't wear blinkers, that artist that doesn't wear blinkers, but it imbibes from everything around us. Every idea, every inspiration. Your mother may be a pilot, your father may be a painter, but you may be something completely different. You may be a football player, but you imbibe from these influences and let them settle within you. So, though I dance, what I say, my classical work, Kathak, I also feel that it's very important to look at our because we are contemporary human beings. And how would I respond to a thought, a process that I cannot show through the wider parameters of my classical tradition? And therefore, I must find a language through which I'm able to share that thought. So a small little extract of a piece called Interrupted. You know, we feel that the human body is a permanent entity, but as we all know, it's not. We have our ups and downs. The body is constantly changing, rejuvenating itself. One day you are super happy, one day you feel a little sad. But what we need to remember that till our last breath, the body is resilient. It's constantly rejuvenating itself. And so this work is called Interrupted, and I would like to share that with you. That as I was talking to you about Kathak, we were on the proscenium stage, and suddenly what happened to us? This river of Kathak was flowing, our lives were flowing, and suddenly we were damned. There was a pandemic the world over. None of us knew what had happened. Suddenly, you were all, each one of us, every human being practically on this beautiful planet of ours was damned, was isolated, was quarantined. We had never experienced anything like this before. And therefore, for me, this initiative Smile has a special meaning because it was started to reach out, even if virtually. Because all of us were anxious, all of us didn't know what had happened. There was discomfort, and there was this sense of not knowing what the next day was going to be like. And so it was very important to have this initiative. And similar to this, we too started an initiative in our dance company called From My Home to Yours. It was not about perfect dancing or in anything. It was only about reaching out to all the artists that I knew across, right? Who I could share my thoughts at that moment and slowly build virtual bridges. And every single day, one person who smiled, the rest of whoever were present on Zoom changed their whole outlook for that day. It really helped me. I'm the world's worst photographer, but suddenly there were no live performances. I had to learn how to use this one little instrument I had and learn how to look at angles, look at light, look at what was in this little environment. Find my creativity within this environment. Find my joy within this environment. Because dance gave me joy. I had to find different ways, and I had to inspire my dancers who are in my company and get inspired by them every single day. And we made a lot of dance films, but we wanted that to reflect what we were feeling at that moment. Everybody was going through a meltdown. I'm sure, like you all were. You know, all of us had this incredible, one did not realize what had happened. There was no answers at all. Your teachers didn't know, your parents didn't know, people who you looked up to didn't know, government didn't know, nobody knew. So there was this intense meltdown. So my dancers and me, we looked at an old work of ours and we combined it with that feeling of a meltdown at that point, of being confined. And we made a film called Meltdown. I'm going to share 3 small films. And this was about the anxiety that we felt, a constant with us anxiety. of us, like all of you, had different spaces. Somebody could only be in a room and open a window. Somebody had a corridor. Somebody could go on their roofs. But what we had was our imagination. What we had was our dance that gave us joy. What we had was passion. What we had was a free mind, a free heart. And so we encouraged each other daily to find creativity and find joy and share our joy and happiness through these anxious moments. Now we made another film because one can spread joy if one becomes that joy. If you cover your face and you don't want to see anything, if you not only physically are you isolated, but if you isolate your heart, you isolate your mind, what happens? You purposely put a shutter on imagination, and then you're not going to find that freedom. So we made a piece called Wrapped, where each dancer talked about how she or he felt trapped, wrapped, completely consumed by what had happened, and yet said, no, I'm going to remove this wrapping. I'm going to unwrap myself. I'm going to let my imagination flow. So here's another one, a short film we made.
Wrapped up in yourself, you hid from me. All day I looked for you. All day I looked for you. And when I found you, hiding inside me, I ran wild, playing now me, now you, now me, now you, now me, now you.
That's how, in our small little way, we were able to survive these really difficult times. We are still continuing to let our imagination flow, to smile and share our joy with those few blocks that we saw on our Zoom. And eventually, slowly, we started realizing that if you find that joy within you, then you find joy all over you. If you're able to help one person by smiling, by sharing joy, by sharing positive energy, positive thoughts, you can transform the world, because you will change one. That one will transform 2, 20, 30, God knows, 1 million people. Everything you do matters. So I end today, before we start the question and answers, by a last short film called Impassion. Be passionate. Feel immersed in what you love doing. Be full of abandon, full of love, but with responsibility. Remember that we live in this world as one world. We are one humanity. There is nobody superior or inferior. We need to share that responsibility of what life has given us. So here's impassion. यार को हमने जा बजा देखा, कहीं जाहिर कहीं छुपा देखा. I see my beloved everywhere. Yeah, I'm open to any questions. Hi, Sakshi.
If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Everything we see is perspective, not the truth. Thank you, ma'am, for such an inspirational talk. I would now invite some of my friends who would like to interact with you.
Namaste, ma'am.
For the children take over, Aditi ji, heartfelt thank you for such an amazing session. Really, your talking itself was a Kathak performance. You know, the way you took us all through it was really, we will wait for you to bless our school as well in person, but for this session as well, thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much, Charu ma'am. I've known you for so many years. You may all not know, but Charu ma'am was my son's teacher, and he was as crazy as I was as a child. No, thank you so much for having me. And I'm open to anything that you would like to chat about.
Yes, over to the children.
Yes, absolutely.
Namaste, ma'am. Ma'am, firstly, I would like to say that it was an honor to see you perform and listen to your insightful views. I'm sure that now many students, including me, would be interested into learning classical Indian dance as you brought out the sheer beauty of it. My question to you is, unlike many classical performers, as you mentioned, you were not born into a family of dancers, yet you managed to make a name for yourself. What would you attribute your success to?
You know, it's not about success. It's about passion. It's about abandon. It's about the journey. And I think you need to be open to the pulse of life, which is really important. You have to be empathetic with everything around you. You know, as if you're not empathetic, as the speaker before me mentioned about what is happening to the farmers, what is happening in this country, if you're not empathetic, then what is success? How do you wait? Yeah. So to me, it's very important to be a really good human being. It's important that I constantly ask myself if I'm being bigoted. I constantly ask myself if I am being judgmental, Because, we are born and our minds get conditioned with what we know, what we like, what we have been exposed to. We get conditioned and we mistakenly start thinking that that is better than what somebody else thinks or feels or believes in. No, we are open. It's a world full of diversity and beauty. And I think, to me, success is when you are able to say, I'm wrong. When you are able to say, okay, that's your opinion, that's my opinion. I don't believe what you are doing is right. And I will try to change that, but I will not hate you for it. To me, success is that.
Thank you, ma'am, for this answer.
Thank you.
Ma'am, most people view classical dance forms as rigid. However, your work has proven otherwise. How do you think one can use this approach to promote classical dance forms among today's youth?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If I remember sitting with my son's friends, and they were all talking about classical dance. And when I talked about some of our great legends, they had not heard of them. They had heard of the great sports stars and the politicians and the film stars, of course, but not classical dancers in India. And we are to blame for that, not you all. Because I think we mistakenly think that the tradition that we are great inheritors of this tradition, and many dance styles exist in this world, and geographically, historically, we are blessed with this particular our classical dance styles. If we make it into a pond, right, it's going to evaporate one day and go. So as dancers and as performers and as gurus and as teachers, it's our responsibility to make sure that classical dance is not a pond. It's not something that is with cement on all sides, which is unchangeable. Nothing is written in stone. So what if something was said in the Natya Shastra? Yes, learn it, understand it, but you have to have relevance to today, right? It has to. And so that's why I talked about the river that is constantly flowing. And the reason I talked about, I asked one of my son's friends, I said, come and let's go to some dance performances which are different and interesting. And tell me why they are different, why they are interesting. But they're classical. Why? Because those dancers are the ones who had imbibed from life, learned from everything that one is exposed to. Look, we are in a lockdown right now. If I just sit and dance what I did 2 years ago, it has no relevance to me today at all. I'm in a real confined space. Should that not affect how I dance? So I feel sometimes in preserving, it's a nail on the coffin. We need to let it flow. What has to sink to the bottom of the river is going to sink. It will become signposts. And what is going to flow into the ocean as a great tradition is going to flow.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure all of us will benefit from this innovation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Ma'am, you were trained by one of the most eminent exponents of Kathak dance, Pandit Birju Maharaj Ji. Please share an anecdote that has remained etched in your memory.
Yes, I was trained by two great legends and I'm still trained by them. I would like to make one small correction. I was not the leading performer in Maharajji's troupe, as was said in my introduction, not the principal dancer. I was a member of Maharajji's troupe when we performed, and of course my other guru, Shrimati Kumudini Lakhia's troupe also. There are so many episodes because Maharaj Ji, it's incredible, because as what I talked about right now, he imbibes from the present. He doesn't make things static and boring. So if sometimes I'm very tiny and I have a very bad habit, and none of you should follow that I wear heels, really high heels. Okay. So he would hear the class, my heels would go tuck, 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 and before I could enter. But before I had entered, taken out my shoes and entered, he had made a rhythmic pattern with that. He would see a leaf falling, and it would, his creative energies would start, and he would make a movement of how the leaf has fallen. So the anecdotes are just too many. I remember once he came to our house, and he said, I would like to sing. So everybody sat around, and he sang through the whole night. He just forgot time, he forgot space, sang and danced, and the entire audience. I was very young, I was your age, Radhika. So I didn't really understand what he was doing. I couldn't understand all the words sometimes. I didn't follow the language at times. And yet, he transformed it because he was so much immersed in it.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really interesting to know about.
Thank you.
Ma'am, a few years ago, objections were raised to your not wearing a dupatta, which is considered an indispensable part of the Kathak costume. Do you think one can break such stereotypes and still maintain the dignity of the art form?
So I'm going to ask you another question, Ishwar. Do you know Kathak was danced only by men? So that's the first stereotype. So I shouldn't be dancing Kathak, right? I mean, men don't wear dupattas, do they?
Yes.
Why? Why? Why do you insist on women wearing a dupatta? Why is it incumbent that a female dancer wear a dupatta? I found it regressive. It's nothing to do with Kathak, because men don't wear a dupatta. If I go back far enough in history, I shouldn't be dancing. So where is the integrity of the dance? Is it in the dance form, or is it in the costume? If you see some of our great artists, even our female Kathak dancers, Sitara Devi ji wore completely different costume. Kumudini Lakhia ji, my own guru, when I was 16 years old for my first solo, she made the costume. There was no dupatta, right? You see Rohini Bhatte ji, she wore a sari. Nobody else wore a sari. You see Madam Menaka, she wore a sleeveless blouse. So why is clothing become so important when we come to women? Not only in the field of dance, Ishwar. We will notice it's in all fields. It's a way of control by society. It's a way of sanction by society. And as a young boy and as a young man, and all of you young students, you have to ask yourself why. And I asked those people, I said, you don't call me a Kathak dancer, that's fine. But you don't call me a Kathak dancer because I don't wear a dupatta, it's strange. Men don't wear it. And I should not be dancing Kathak because women never danced Kathak initially. So we have to be very, very vigilant about how society starts conditioning our upbringing, starts conditioning our mindset. Little things you hear. You hear, kya chudi pehen rakhi hai? Means what? What does it actually mean? It means derogatory way of saying, are you a girl? But that's because women wear bangles. Is it it's a way of derogatory saying, are you a girl? Right? It's not right. And we get conditioned with these things. So we have to be very, very careful and see these they become part of our daily upbringing. Don't cry like a girl. Why? Showing emotions is strength. It's not a weakness. So if a boy cries or a girl cries, it's the fact that they are confident to be able to show their emotion. We have to do that on their backs, not deride them. Many, many things. And I request all you students, all parents, of how these little things in terms of gender, in terms of religion, in terms of the color of the skin, in terms of caste, in terms of nationality, everything starts dividing us. And division is never going to, what your school is teaching and what your school is sharing, joy and happiness and smile. How can you divide and be happy and smile? So keep smiling and integrate, be inclusive.
Thank you, ma'am, for that answer.
Thank you.
All of us will try to be as brave as you are in confronting such stereotypes. In your interview with Armin Sprott, you once said that great dance happens when silence meets dance. Please share what you meant when you said that.
Yes, that was it was for great philosopher J. Krishnamurti's concert, which I was doing in London. And there was a pianist and me dancing. And, I tell myself, when I'm studying or when I was studying, right? Or when I'm rehearsing, I fill myself with influences, with all the knowledge I have of Kathak, which has come from my two gurus, from my students, from my colleagues, from all the dancers I see. In fact, the next time it will be from the questions you have asked. I fill myself with that when I'm rehearsing, right? Fill. So every influence. But when I go onto stage, if I go full, that bowl is full, how am I going to receive anything from anywhere? So when I go onto stage, I say, I would like to empty myself completely. And that's what I mean by a place of silence. And then what happens is something incredible happens of that moment. Yeah. I just to end, I loved mathematics. I graduated with mathematics. And when I was young, I didn't like it. And I was really lucky to have a great teacher later on who really helped me to see the beauty in mathematics, to see how numbers can emote and how numbers can form structures. And you learn, but when you go for that examination, if your mind is so full of everything you've learned, it's going to be very difficult to have that instant clarity. You need silence, and you need, in a way, to empty the mind. It's strange to say that, because when I mean empty the mind, I mean when all the burdens have been emptied out. So it's from that sense of silence that you then look at your question paper and you have it.
Yes, ma'am. I absolutely agree. I think that's great advice for anything in life. A lot of times we bundle ourselves with all these expectations and doubts, and sometimes we just need to let go and be completely clear in what we're doing. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and stay well and stay positive. Thank you, Charu ma'am.
Thank you, Aditi ji. Thank you for really filling us up today with such, just nuggets of wisdom. And these little nuggets, we are not going to empty at all.
Thank you so much.
As we reach the end of the session, I would like to conclude with a quote by Aditi. As our world is becoming smaller, our hearts and minds must be bigger. You instill immense hope, a belief in our uniqueness, and encouraged us to look at the world differently. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us today.